Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene the summit. And as I promised you, we have a stellar panel today. And before we dive into the topic, I would like to introduce our esteemed guest, prominent journalist Katie Hopkins, renowned editor-in-chief of the Battleground, Joel Schalit, and esteemed filmmaker and writer Marian Lebor. Thank you all so very much for coming on the show today. And we have so many issues to address, but our main topic is a hot potato, and I'm putting it mildly, maybe the UK recent deal with Rwanda to transfer illegal migrants there. So let's take a closer look and pick up the debate after.
A controversial immigrant resettlement plan is being pushed by the British government as ministers seek to send illegal immigrants found in the UK to Rwanda. Spearheaded by the UK's Home Secretary Priti Patel, who has continuously reaffirmed the government's determination to overcome any legal hurdles that might get in the way of the relocation process. Patel highlighted that under the scheme, asylum seekers will be flown to the African country where they will wait for their applications to be processed. The policy has provoked widespread criticism, with more than 160 charities, opposition parties and conservative backbenchers protesting injustice. The plan comes amid a drastic rise in the number of small boat crossings across the English Channel, with more than 6,000 people crossing in 2022 alone. However, challenges to the scheme's legality, cost and efficacy continue to circulate. Prime Minister Boris Johnson revealed that 50 migrants have already been issued a relocation warning, making the question of ethics more pertinent than ever. How justified are the British government's plans to send illegal immigrants to Rwanda?
So let's get to it. Is sending illegal immigrants to Rwanda justified or not? Ladies and gentlemen, you know the rules. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance, and we pick up the debate after. So Joel, take the lead.
I think it's a terrible idea. The British government is trying to set a precedent for outsourcing refugees, which is probably more in common with, countries like Australia, which offshore refugees in their own facilities outside the Australian continent. In the meantime, the British have registered acceptance of over 100,000 Ukrainians, refugees from the Ukrainian conflict. So obviously there's legitimate claims of racism involved in the separation of
Joel, we'll put a stop right there and continue in a tiny bit. Ms. Hopkins, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think the plan is essentially a distraction. Sending back 50 people to Rwanda makes no difference whatsoever when you have 7,000 plus actually that have arrived this year. I called in 2014 for us to stop the boats. I was arrested and interviewed under caution for having that opinion because it's against the general consensus. I think your clip was poorly put together because you showed children and women, and there aren't many of those. And I think ultimately it's all about the fact that unless you're a mum trying to access the NHS or trying to get a school place for your child, you don't review.
Yes, we will touch all those points in a second. But last, definitely not least, Marianne, please.
OK, well, as we know, there's been mounting pressure for the British government to do something about all the asylum seekers as they arrive in the south of England. But I've got a few questions about the proposed Rwanda deal. How will ordinary Rwandans react to the influx of asylum seekers from a wealthy Western nation to their already densely populated country? Are there justifiable concerns about human rights in Rwanda? And what does the scheme mean for undocumented Ukrainian refugees, due to the chaos with visas happening now in the UK, who enter the UK via Ireland? Could they be sent to Rwanda?
Well, all of these are questions that we will debate now. Please feel free to interact, dear panelists. So my first question to you will be, the church is even calling this step immoral. Is it a modern version to an extent of state-sponsored human trafficking? Is it fair to suggest that, Ms. Hopkins?
I just love it when the church gets involved with this kind of thing. We have, Justin Welby banging on about this, that and the other. happily forgetting that he was once an oil baron and he has a nice fat pension from that career and in the church as well. I'd love to see Justin Welby or members of the church try and ring a doctor on at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning and try and get an appointment for their sick child. I'd love them to have an elderly relative who can't get a hip replacement because there's no funding in the NHS. These are the real problems. It's all very well for one of your panelists to start asking questions about people's human rights. What about the human rights of ordinary British taxpayers who can't find school places, can't get places in their hospitals, and are struggling to pay their own fuel bills right here in the country to which they belong?
Joel, please, I know you have a take on that.
I think that this entire controversy is very helpful to the Tory government right now because Boris Johnson can't seem to escape from any of the controversies surrounding his Partygate problems, as well as his deviation from traditional conservative policy in dealing with the COVID crisis and with the economy. And so it's a perfect storm, so to speak. And the more controversy there is about the deportations, the better. The bottom line is the deportations help underline the fact that Boris's government is essentially an ethnocentric, racist government that has been very popular by virtue of the xenophobia it's stoked in recent years, particularly around refugees and migrants.
Have you got some other labels you could have? Because you managed racist, you managed xenophobic, you managed all the typical labels. Labels don't get us anywhere. They're just labels. It's just empty words that you're using.
But you've used labels to say that immigrants taking your place at a doctor's surgery, that asylum seekers are taking... No, it's a fact, but it's quite an insulting and incorrect fact. Let's actually think what it's like.
It's not a label, though.
Let's think what it's actually like for a refugee or an asylum seeker when they land somewhere. Sorry?
Please, have you spent any time? Let me ask you a question. Have you spent any time? Have you lived in the migrant camp in Calais, in the jungle? Have you been there yourself? Because I have.
I haven't been there.
Politics my whole career.
You haven't been. No, I'm asking the lady. She's never been there, and now she wants to be the one that explains what it's like to these people. You've never even been there. I've been there. I've lived in that jungle for a week, and I know what it's like. And I don't know how you think you've got the right to tell me what it's like to be an asylum seeker.
Yeah,
At least I've been and
I
seen
think
it
was food for thought, not telling off anyone. But Marianne, maybe speaking of labels, sovereignty shouldn't be taboo. Maybe it is a step necessary on behalf of the British government to safeguard its citizens, as Ms. Hopkins suggested, and its borders. And again, maybe it's a legitimate call on behalf of the government.
Look, this is clearly a very big problem, and it's a big problem worldwide. We've now got so many Ukrainian refugees, in addition to all the asylum seekers that try to get into the UK and are going through Europe. It's a very, very big problem. How do you address it if you don't go to the root cause in the countries where people are desperate and leave? They're not picking up one day and deciding to leave. What I was about to say before I was interrupted, and Katie, my name's Marian. You can call me the lady, but my name's Marian. That's okay. I was going to say, just to think for a moment what life is like as a refugee. I'm a first-generation British person. My mother came on the kinder transport from Germany. Most of my family perished, and a generation came on the kinder transport. That is something which stays with you your entire life. The British government managed to get its act together in about 3 weeks after Kristallnacht, and 10,000 children came between December 38 and the start of war in September 39. So Britain could do it. They've done it in the past. Now, you have to have some compassion. People are desperate. That's why they're trying to come. You wouldn't go on a dinghy in the Channel if you were not desperate. And what's going to happen to Ukrainian refugees? And why aren't they being found somewhere in the UK more competently than is happening now?
But maybe those policies are simply a polite way to I'm not sure polite, but a way to discourage migration from the get-go if they know that they're going through this lengthy process and at the end of the day being sent to a third party, to an African country. Joel?
Not
Without doubt,
it's not a chance.
I look at this policy as simply being an extension of the Brexit project and the ethnic politics of the Brexit project. And I look at it also as I said earlier, as emergency flak politics to deal with Boris's problems right now leading the United Kingdom, and the fact that he has to flank right in order to appeal more legitimate to his party, which has been criticizing him heavily over his handling of Partygate and a number of internal long-running domestic policy disputes, particularly his, adopting of labor-style Keynesian policies in terms of public spending that would have shocked, any conservative administration prior to Boris's in terms of its abandonment of traditional libertarian fiscal policies.
Katie, how do you suggest dealing with this problem? You're saying that even this deal is just, a Band-Aid covering zilch, essentially.
Yeah, I totally agree with your other panelists that it's all a distraction from Boris Johnson's ridiculous failings on many levels, unless we're prepared to do the right thing, which is stop the boats from even leaving the shores of France. We will never solve this problem. The column I wrote on this in 2014 is still true nearly a decade later, although I am pleased that your channel finally showed some realistic images of people getting off those craft. When I was there in the jungle, it's about 95% single males who are coming across. It's a very, very coordinated and systematic trafficking of people. And these are not always desperate people. These are people who are looking for economically a better life. And there is no reason that they shouldn't stay in France, because that would be the first safe country that they travel through. They should not be making their way to the UK.
And similar points were made here in Israel, Katie and dear panelists, that migrants coming from Africa, or illegal migrants rather, are crossing through other countries. Here in the region, it's Egypt. And this strategy is not a UK novelty. We've seen it in Australia, here in Israel, elsewhere in the EU. Maybe we should just, accept the fact that this is one alternative to deal with it.
So outsourcing refugees or asylum seekers to another country, possibly Africa, possibly countries which have their own issues and their own problems, and you're just sweeping it under the carpet. And I think the Israeli asylum seekers who ended up in Rwanda have almost all left, if I'm not mistaken, gone to other countries in Europe or who knows where. So you have to treat it at source, I'm imagining. I'm interested, Katie, because stop them crossing the channel, fair enough, but the problem really is in the countries they are leaving. So how does that get addressed? What do we do as wealthy Western countries to help those countries?